Good morning. I'm Shari, Monson, interim pastor here at Hamblin Park. Did you notice the roar of activity when the kids left? Did you notice that it was more than just the kids who were getting up and going? Just a quick word of explanation. We're in a series of Sunday school lessons for kids and their parents. And for example, last Sunday, I had the joy of being with second graders and their parents talking about worship. All the different parts to our worship services, what each part means and how they can be involved. That's what's happening. Important life lessons are being learned this morning by children and their parents. Well, this is the time of year at Hamblin Park where we sit down with each staff person and we ask these very important questions. What are the highlights going on in your area of ministry right now? What are you excited about in the coming year? And what could we bring to you to help grow ministry in your area? It is such a fun conversation. I really wish that each one of you could come to the table in the midst of these conversations and join us. I think you would be really encouraged by what you hear. And my hunch is that you might be tempted to respond in in two ways, really. You might be tempted to reach into your pocket and pull out your checkbook and your calendar, because it is so exciting what is happening here. And my sense is that you would wish to be a part of this with your time and your talents and your treasure. God is up to some amazing things here at Hamblin. God is at work, and truly every day lives are being changed. Last week, each of us received the 2015 pledge packet, right? Yes, you either picked yours up last Sunday morning or you received yours in the mail. I like to think of these as packets of inspiration, and I hope that you do as well. If you've not received yours yet, there's more out in the narthex that you can pick up after church. Pledging is one of the ways that we join our efforts with what God is doing here at the ministry of Hamblin. And our goal is to have everyone participate in this pledging, whether you're young or old, or you feel like you're rich or not so rich, whether you have been here for 1 week or a gazillion weeks, whether you're a member or not, everyone is invited to participate in this. And Pastor Brad reports that already some pledges are coming in, which is terrific. And if you're visiting with us today, we hope that the truth and practicality of today's message will be an encouragement to you. I want to tell you a story. There's a man named Albert Lexie who served as a shoe shine man for 30 years at Pittsburgh General Hospital. He set up shop, and each day that he went to work, he knocked dirt off of people's shoes. He buffed them, and he polished them, and he charged a mere $5 for doing so. It's fair to think of him in a similar way as we encounter the widow in today's scripture passage. He's not the guy who stands out at the hospital. He's not a doctor on an important life-changing mission, and he is not needed when an emergency situation happens in the hospital. It is appropriate to think of Albert on the sidelines, tending to the dirt and the dust and other indignities. Albert says that customers typically leave a tip, maybe $1, maybe $2. There was once on a Christmas that after polishing just one pair of shoes, he got a $50 tip. But that was very unusual. Big tips didn't happen all that often. When it comes to seeking funds for hospital campaigns, Albert is not the guy that you would typically think of to have on your major donor list. So let's do some math, all right? Feel free to get out a pencil, calculator on your phone, whatever you use. Since the day he shined his first pair of shoes at the hospital, 30 years ago, Albert has donated more than 1/3 of his earnings to a fund that the hospital uses to help parents whose children are sick and need care, but they cannot afford to cover the medical expenses. In addition to this, Albert has given all of the tips that he receives to the same hospital fund. Every single tip. How much do you suppose Albert, the shoe shine guy, could give away? How much would there actually be for him to give? Well, when the hospital administration was interviewed about the time of Albert's retirement, they estimated that he had given just over $200,000. Maybe some of you have scribbled calculations in the corner of your bulletin. When I did so, my number came up something like this. About 250 days a year he probably worked for 30 years. That's just over $25 a day. Isn't that amazing? It's astonishing. At first, 200 grand seems like an impossible number. That's the size of a donation you would expect from someone who's rich. Maybe some flashy professional athlete. They write $200,000 checks, right? For hospital funds and telethons. And yet that is the correct number. You can check it out. You can Google Albert Lexie, Lexie. The point is, even small amounts, when given faithfully over years, make a huge, huge difference. They add up to a powerful legacy. All it takes is a commitment to share what you have to bless others. Stewardship is truly a matter of the heart. In our passage today from Mark 12, Jesus redefines for us what it means to be rich. And he points out in his teaching that it is a matter of being just and a matter of being generous. Rich in justice. Listen to these verses that take place just before we encounter the widow making her offering. Jesus teaches, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and like being greeted in the marketplace. They like to have seats, the best seats in the synagogue, and to sit in places of honor." But here's Jesus' warning in verse 40. "These are the ones who devour widows' houses and by pretense offer long prayers. They will receive greater condemnation." Yikes. What is going on there? Well, Jesus is aware of a practice that was not uncommon back in the first century, where temple officials were known to sometimes swindle widows out of their homes. And sometimes they even moved into those homes and lived there. And that's what Jesus means by devour widows' houses. Jesus instructs religious leaders, and this is a point for all of us who lead here at Hamblin. It was an important point then, and it is now. We are to be just in all manners of administration. The widow who gave all she had to live on, meaning her whole life, should never have been put in such a position by the temple taxes. So rich in justice is a part of Jesus' teaching, and rich in generosity. Did you notice that Jesus had to gather his disciples back around him to offer them this next point? It's quite likely the disciples had kind of scattered away at that warning that he'd given to all the temple officials. You don't necessarily want to be standing around Jesus when he mentions those things. Well, he calls them back together and he says, "Hey guys, I've got something important to tell you. It is praiseworthy to give your whole life to my cause." Jesus wanted them to understand that this widow, in her generosity, took a stand with what justice is about and what generosity means. And she is the one in the whole crowd of the temple who stands out in Jesus' eyes. Our stewardship campaign is a matter of justice and of generosity. Our leaders' task is to establish a church budget that is generous and just. And in your pledging packets, the mission support elders spell out what is needed in the 2015 budget in order to provide what is needed to compensate staff, to call a new pastor, to grow the programs that are thriving in our church, and to partner with our community and overseas mission partners. At this point, I'm going to share this sermon in a stewardship conversation with two members who have very generously offered to share their perspective with you. If Penny Lucas and Brad Stark would please come up. I've asked Penny to answer two questions for us this morning that come right out of this text. Penny, how is it that you determine what portion of your riches you will give in pledge to the church? I'm going to have you step right up here. And also, part two, in what way do you feel rich by participating in this? And when Penny's done, I've asked Brad to share his perspective on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shari. Well, to decide how much to give to the church, first, I take a look at what giving 10% of my income looks like, using 10% as a biblical guide to tithing. I've never reached that goal, but it's a good figure to start with, and I've tried to get as close to that as I can and still meet my other budgeted needs and expenses. And to help me pay it, I use the church's automatic bank, take it out of my checking every month. And I know the money's in there when I've started the month. I've budgeted for it, just like I do my AT&T and all the other bills. It's part of my expenses. It gets paid monthly. And I know there's money to cover it. So that's a really good thing for me to do with my failing memory and missing Sundays now and then. When I got my packet and read in the letter that I was being asked to prayerfully consider upping my pledge $150 a year, I went back to my budget program, and since I do a monthly planning, get paid monthly, everything's kind of been on a monthly basis for me for a lot of years, I figured out this is only $12.50 a month. And that was easy to find. That was 2 Subway meals in my fast food budget. And so that was, okay, I can do that. And I upped my pledge this year. And that's pretty much how I've been doing it for quite a few years. The second question on rich. There's a couple of kinds of rich. And I feel rich when I can look at the spreadsheet and see the income and the expenses, that God has given me enough that I can choose where my money goes. I can choose to have that Subway sandwich if I want to. That's a very rich feeling. But I also feel that God has given me enough. And that's a rich feeling. Enough that when I give to the church here at Hamlin, I feel blessed to be able to work with the Handchime Choir, to be a part of the adult missions, to go to great adult classes, to see the work that Hamlin Park does, helping people in Spokane and in the mission field. That is feeling rich in God's blessing.
Good morning. Pastor Shari is new. She's new here and on an interim basis, and I'm sure that That's when we call a new pastor, one of the key things that she's going to tell the new pastor when he or she comes in here is never give Brad Stark the microphone and a listening congregation. I prepared some notes I want to talk about a little bit this morning, and I actually hate public speaking. It's something I dread and I fear. My heart pounds and so on and so forth. So please be patient and gracious with me, especially because of the fact that we're talking about money in church. And I promise that is the last of my stand drum bad joke quota of a lot of bad jokes. Last week, Steve Sparks was up here. Steve, a great friend, and we volunteered together on the Mission Support Committee. And Steve made it quick during one of the services that, oh, geez, guys, I've got horrible news. I've got bad news. The church needs more money. And we all kind of laughed, and I acknowledged, Steve, that was a way to try to break the tension with humor and so on and so forth. And that's because nobody likes to talk about money, especially in church. I actually take a different approach and view from my friend Steve, and that's the fact that I think it's fantastic that the church needs more money. I think it's a great thing that we are trying to increase our budget here at Hamblin Park. The reason I believe that is it's fantastic because our church is growing. It's fantastic because our church is serving more people here in our church and in our community. It means the church is furthering the mission set forth by Jesus Christ. And it means that the church is continuing to reach further beyond its walls, beyond our property, and finding new ways to serve those in our community here in Spokane and internationally abroad. It also means that we remain relevant to those that we serve and to our members. Shari, I don't know if you guys remember a couple of weeks back, Shari played a video talking about church and the fact that it's a revolution in progress, a revolution in process, 2,000 years in the making. Do you guys remember that video a few weeks ago? I love that video, and I think we are so fortunate that we have the opportunity to play a part in that revolution, especially when you think, in historical terms, that revolutions typically means guns and death and violence and other things. My career track is I've always been involved with money some way, somehow, either directly or tangentially. I'm a certified financial planner, and I lead a successful financial advisory practice where we help clients address their wealth management concerns as they pursue their life goals and financial goals. Let me tell you, I've had many conversations with folks regarding their wealth, large and small, and I see directly and intimately how it affects their lives, both good and bad. Before this, as many of you know, I actually had a career in politics. I worked in the state legislature in Olympia and had the great fortune to be elected to the Spokane City Council. And I want to let you in on a little secret. There's money in politics. As if you didn't know that already. From this last week, we had an election, and the months prior, we had the airways were covered with negative attack ads, and we saw campaign signs and billboards plastered throughout the community and all over right-of-ways, and our mailboxes were full of these nice, pretty mail pieces that soon our garbage cans were full of these nice, pretty mail pieces. Before my political career, I actually worked for two different nonprofits here in the Spokane area, primarily, most of you know, the Boy Scouts of America, where I was actually involved in their fund development and fundraising efforts. It was my job to go out and talk to people about money and get them to support the Boy Scouts of America here in the community. From these experiences, there's a saying that I learned from a couple of folks that folks shared with me, and it's a little jaded and it's a little cynical, but I want to share it with you now. I'm going to come back and talk about it in a little bit. That is, people give to people, not causes. People give to people, not causes. From all of my professional experiences in my work life, I can tell you one thing with great confidence. People hate talking about money. They hate it. It's so funny that people will talk about it instead of weather. They'll talk about, the weather we're having, the leaves are turning and falling, the sports, did you see Vernon Adams was back at Eastern yesterday? All these different things. They'll talk about sports and weather. Then they'll want to tell you about their latest health malady and their last visits to the doctor. Pretty soon we'll get into some of the issues where they'll start talking about their dark family secrets and, how that prodigal and misguided child is at it again. Eventually we keep peeling back the layers. And finally, we start talking about money, and we start talking about things that are important to them. the things that they value, the things that are important to them. It's at this point where we're talking about money, finances, cold hard cash, where we are actually talking about values. And we're talking about the legacies that they want to leave behind, where we're talking about the lives that they want to lead. From these years talking about money and helping people with money, I've come to many conclusions. And actually, I could spend hours sitting here, but obviously, we've got a second service, and so we won't do that. But I want to share two conclusions with you as we go forward. First, money is an amplifier. Whatever your personality is, whatever character you possess, money will amplify who you are. If you are a generous person, money is a tool that makes you a greater, more generous person. If you are a jerk, if you're not a nice person and you have lots of money, you get the idea. Second, as I mentioned before, people give to people, not causes. We all know that there are so many incredible organizations in our community that do great work here in Spokane, in Eastern Washington, and throughout the entire world, in fact. We simply cannot support them all. Katie and I end up supporting a lot of these organizations, though, not because we have direct alliance or allegiance to some of these organizations, but because we were asked. Diane King is very involved in the Krista Foundation and has invited me to a number of their events. And we go, and we support those. Just Friday, my friend Dan asked me to go to a fundraising breakfast to support the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Spokane County. And I went, and we did, and we supported them. Kevin Burkumpus, here in our congregation, asked me to support the American Red Cross this coming week. And I do, and we will. And the list goes on. Actually, it's kind of funny. I don't know if Paul Reed's here today, but typically I see Paul Reed at almost all these events, so much so that we actually talk about commuting together sometimes and ride sharing. Friends, today I, Brad Stark, ask you, fellow parishioners and fellow congregants here at Hamlin Park Presbyterian, to support our church. This is not a duty, it's not an obligation, it's an opportunity that we have. More importantly, I ask you to support Hamblin's mission of furthering Christ's gospel and helping those in need here in Spokane. Think back to that video, the 2,000-year revolution in progress. Think of Hamblin's role in that and look at all that has been accomplished in years past right here in these walls and in this building and in this community, and all the things that will continue for many years. Let's reflect upon that. We at Hamblin support the next generation of church leadership. Nick Preniger and Selena Slater. And Selena will be preaching here on Thanksgiving Eve, so I hope all of you can make it there on that Wednesday night. We grow new ministry opportunities right here in Spokane, in our Spokane community. We support the food bank down in West Central, Night Out Against Crime block party with our local neighborhood. Today, this morning, we're packing up the bags after hosting families in crisis through transitional housing. And one of the really impressive and neat things that we've taken on is the Bike to Go at the core, where we're actually supporting needy children in our neighborhood with food over the weekends. Not only are we doing Christ's work here in Spokane, we're doing Christ's work throughout the world. We have ministries that we support. Christy Van Nostrum in Central America. We have another husband and wife missionary couple that we support in Haiti. And we continue to develop the services and impacts here in our internal ministries. We have a new youth intern this year. We are continuously updating our adult education. And we have folks that are working and going through the strategic and long-range planning committee where we'll define and say, what does Hamlin Park mean to this community for the next 15 to 20 years at this location? And we're going through the process of calling a new pastor. These are exciting and thrilling times at Hamlin Park Presbyterian Church. Because we are doing so much, it is very easy to lose sight of what is actually happening. It's one of those you lose sight of the forest in spite of the trees type of situations. Make no mistake, Hamlin Park is furthering the work of Jesus Christ, and we are blessed. We are so fortunate. We are rich because we have the opportunity to be a part of that. Whether you give and how you give is a deeply personal and private matter. I'm not near, I'm not stupid in the fact that I'm not going to stand here and tell you what you should give and how much you should give. There are plenty of ways to get drummed out of church, but that's not one I plan on going out on. I do want to share with you a bit about Katie and I's discernment and some of the activities and our experiences in this the last number of years. And I want to be honest and personal with you about it. I'm not going to stand here and lie to you and drum my shoe on the table and tell you that you must give 10%. That would be hypocritical of me, because we don't. Ironically, there was a time early in our marriage where we did for a number of years. I affectionately call this period before children. Today, church competes for our dollars. It competes with other charities and nonprofits. It competes with bills and mortgages and student loans. It competes with living expenses like groceries and insurance. And yes, it actually does compete with fun money like going to the movies and skiing. Giving to the church can sometimes be just a total drag. Sometimes it feels we give out of obligation and duty. We have to because it's a chore. Sometimes it feels like we're giving and living on faith. Okay, God, I'm giving you money. Now bless me so I can, it's like we're trying to make a trade. Sometimes we give as we've been recently inspired. Yay, Shari, great sermon, Ultimately, no matter where we are in our giving, we give out of the belief in Jesus Christ and the belief and the knowledge that seemingly insignificant expressions of gratitude will be magnified in a way that we know not yet. Thank you for your indulgence this morning. And I invite you to join with me in joining this revolution 2,000 years in the process. Not with guns, not with gusto, not with salvo, but with our checkbooks and with love.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Brad. Please pray with me. Lord God, we thank you for the gifts that you so graciously give to us. Thank you that you instruct us to respond to all of our blessings out of a sense of justice and generosity. May this be ever more true of us today because we have encountered you here in our worship. May the truth of this sink deeply into our lives in practical, life-giving ways. We pray this and hope because of who Jesus is to us. Amen.